Well, thanks, Chris. As I start, it's great to be here, and it's not necessarily the end of my time in aged care. There is a season coming up where I'll sort of certainly be changing roles. But I was reflecting this morning when I left politics. I gave a speech at a school, 50th anniversary, and it's kind of stuck with me because it was 50 years, big moment, and the principal spoke and he goes, "Oh, look, hello everyone. We just want to thank the boys because they've started very early this morning. They started with maths and, they've been here through all the events in the day." And I thought, that's perfect. What an anchor as I talked to the boys. So when I got up, I said, "Boys, well done. Thank you for your patience. And, I can't think of a worse way to start the day than doing maths." And I kind of watched the reaction across the audience as the boys started to laugh. And then I saw all the bishops in the front. And I remembered I was at St Paul's. It was a Catholic school, so it was mass that... so they started with mass. Anyway, recovered, quickly said... "Oh, mass, no, mass, boys, that is the best way to start the day." So I hope I don't have any faux pas this morning. But look, as I reflect, I start with this, and that is a confession. Because before I came into aged care, before my mother came into aged care, I would see events... Oh, go on, I need to talk, there it is. I would see this in my local street and I'd just move past. There's just an old lady that's on her way to shopping or whatever, but inconsequential, no need to pay attention, invisible, not there in my eyes. And what's happened as I've had the wonder of seeing my mum cared for, but also being in this sector, my eyes are opened. And now, when I see that, I wonder who she is. I wonder who she's loved. I wonder where she's travelled. I wonder who her family is. I wonder what her pain's been. I wonder what she's shopping. I wonder whether she cooks. Does she cook? Does she enjoy to cook? And it's just different. And I feel richer, more human, because part of this is real and significant and is not invisible. I also had the time when I was in public life to spend time, on the street with some of the homeless, with the big issue. And you put that vest on, you feel invisible. And I think that our elderly feel that. They feel across the country this sense of being invisible. And what I love about this sector, and many people in this room, is that we have fought for them. We believe in them. And we want to do everything possible to give the care that they deserve. And that does give me a sense of optimism, as I've had the privilege to be part of this group. It's also been an incredibly tough time. The Royal Commission, the pandemic, that's taken its toll. But I guess what I'm asking today is we need to keep going. This group needs to keep going, to keep focusing on the difference that you are making, because I believe it's significant. Now, if I touch on the reform, like, how's that for a slide? Boom. I said to the department, I said, look, I would love to kind of get a roadmap. Can we? Because it feels like a lot of reforms going on. Can you maybe put it on one slide? Oh, we'll try. There it is. And that's not, that is incredible. And it actually is credit to the department, the public servants and the governments. Two parts of governments have started and one is sort of underway here. But it's a huge number and it's exhausting. It's had a big toll on us, but there is positive impacts. And I think that's one thing I really want to highlight, because through all that, I think there are some things that are going to make a difference for the long term. Three things that I have there that I think very significant. I can't talk more highly. To me, this is the most significant thing that has happened. And I'll get to a slide in a minute that I think demonstrates it. But governments can no longer sit at an ERC table and just decide that we need to balance the books or we need to find some savings, so we'll just take a bit off aged care again, because that's what governments of all persuasions did for a considerable period. Now, they might do that, but what they're going to have to argue publicly is IACPA's going to produce what is the cost of delivering quality care. And the more rigour and the more rhythm that comes into that, it'll become harder and harder, for government to refute. It'll become a process, I think, that is just endorsed ongoing. That is a very, very significant development. The care minutes as well, I think we give governments a hard time. The former government's response, significant boost in funding. This government's response, to their credit, took the care minutes even further. I think that's something that we have to be very positive about. There are more carers. There is a capacity for more nurses and carers in the system, and that does give me hope going forward, including in October when another uplift comes. Now, improved transparency, that's on us. Now, the star ratings, they're not perfect. There's a range of things about them that we could talk about for hours, but what is at the core? The core is, we have to be accountable, for those of us in the sector, for what we're delivering, the quality of that care, and the impact it's having. And for those coming into the system, it is tough to negotiate, it is difficult to understand, and trying to bring improved transparency, we have to welcome. And we can help shape that and change that in terms of making sure that it does actually deliver, and it is meaningful, and it does help families as they put through that period of putting a loved one into aged care. We've also had this, which is the Aged Care Task Force. Crazy, brave and optimistic opportunity. I say again to the government, and Chris said this, I think it is gutsy. I understand what it's like to be in government and to do something like an aged care task force to bring recommendations that aren't necessarily going to be popular, but we know the problem. Chris has outlined that in some sense. The requirement into aged care funding is beyond the means of government to fund. That's what the intergenerational report says. So we can see that problem and stare at it, or we can actually try to address it and make a difference. And this government, in terms of trying to take it on, they're taking it on knowing that the long-term impacts are going to come for future generations. To me, that's good government and good policy. So there is credit to them to taking it on. Now, it's obviously not a perfect report, but I think there are some very good things that sort of come out of that, which gives us an opportunity, and government an opportunity, to make a difference. And I will note in that the opposition at this point is appearing to take a very constructive approach to that. And it should be bipartisan. This is about our elderly Australians. How do we fund care for them should be something that politics has left at the door, and that's my hope. Three things there that I think is important. Again, the basic daily fee, indexing it, IACPA actually telling us what is the cost, not just sort of capped at a number, actually making it connected to the actual cost of providing those services. The RAD retention, you heard Chris talk about, how much capital is required. And I think that's kind of been missed a little bit in the reporting. $5 billion by 2030, but it's 20 years later, it's another $35 billion. That's just for new. And if you think of the age of existing stock and the quality of existing stock, the capital requirement is unbelievably significant. So the RAD retention, that's an opportunity to provide providers a stream to do more. Obviously, while RADs are here, it's a long-term proposition. And I will say on the RADs, the thing about the review in 2030, whatever system is determined by 2035, it has to work. It has to mean that banks will continue to fund. It has to mean that additional capital will come in, whether it be super funds or other. At the moment, there is $8 billion that banks lend to the sector. There's $35 billion in RADs. So whatever system comes in, there is a huge amount. And banks haven't got the capacity to fund all of that. So there's a lot to work out, but the review will provide that capacity. So there is time to work out an alternate solution, and the review will ensure that it actually can meet the needs of the sector. But in the meantime, the RAD retention provides a capital source that enables you to get on with building the new facilities and upgrading as required. And then home care, a really important development, co-contributions in a way that actually deals with the growing need. 20,000 packages a year, or 40,000 packages a year. But if you think about the co-contributions coming into home care, very important price signals, providing a capacity for providers to have additional funding in home care, so new services, that innovation, all of that gives us a capacity to think, how are we going to deliver what is needed. You heard all about the changes. Chris said there's going to be more in the home, so more services are needed, and we have a chance through co-contributions to actually fund it. That's a very important point. Now, this graph gives me the sense of hope. That's just from 2017, wage line versus the indexation received. Now, I know that's an old story, but as a former banker, when I looked at that, that's not sustainable. And, hats off to those that have been in the sector for 25, 30 years, operating without the funding that's needed. And, I think that as a country, there's a real challenge that we have overseen, and that gap was a reality. Now, there's a shift in the most recent indexation, but, one swallow doesn't make a summer. So that trend, but that does give me hope. The indexation starts to reflect the cost of providing quality care, and that's a very important development. So that certainly gives me hope going forward. Now, there are challenges. Like anything, when reform comes, that you go back to that first slide with all of that reform, there are challenges that come. And the compliance burden is huge, and I probably don't have to tell everyone about it, you all know it. But this is the sense that I have. I mean, some of them, audited minutes. We just had someone come out and audit our minutes, page after page of requirement, spreadsheets, process review, payroll records, on and on and on. Now, I'm not saying that minutes shouldn't be audited, but surely there is a simpler way to do it. Key personnel reporting in the banking sector, there's a handful of people that are key personnel. I don't know how many people you have, but we have about 115 trying to follow the definition to the point. The compliance costs in maintaining that register, on and on. So is there a benefit to it? That's a question that I have. You need to do it, but surely that can be streamlined. And quarterly reporting. I mean, my finance team, who are normally up and about, they're very happy finance people, my finance team. Not at this time. So once a quarter, they disappear into the vortex, about 6 of them for a week, to do this quarterly financial reporting. Now, is that being used in a way that is delivering better care or transparent? Is that really needed? Does it move the dial? And I think that's what we have to challenge. And as a collective, we're open to transparency, but we should push back where it is taking a compliance burden, it is taking resources and not necessarily delivering an outcome. And one of the things I think the government should do is actually do an assessment, of all the reforms done. Are they delivering the outcomes that we expect and hope? Are there unintended consequences? What is the compliance burden? And I think that is something that we have to do as a collective. So, hope, but also challenges. But when I think of these challenges, I do respond to this. There you go. Now, what do you see? There's something about that photo. Never, ever doubt that a Prime Minister, and a Premier for that matter, knows where a camera is. Look at that. All of us are looking at a resident who's waving at us. PM's got the camera. Look at him. So look, and I did that too, so I've got it. So, but my big positive is this: the government's listening, and that is a very unique time when a government listens to concerns and responds. And this was talking about the wage increase. We spoke about wage increases for a long time. This government not only spoke about it, they committed to funding it, and when it came, that's what they've done. And we've had, obviously, an announcement this week. So when we put compliance burdens on others, my sense when the government's listening, there's an opportunity. And when more challenges come, there's an opportunity. And again, I put down the opposition in this because it's a significant thing when you can have a bipartisan approach to such important policy, and I certainly think that's what we're seeing. My last point is this. The hope and the optimism and the reforms that I've outlined through the task force recommendations, through the reforms that have come, I do think that gives us something. But to me, we can never lose sight, and what gives me the greatest sense of optimism is what we do on a daily basis. And my hope, as leaders, we never ever lose this. And I've spoken before, how do you stay connected in a way that's real and palpable to the wondrous work that is done? Now, when I put this up, it's inconsequential. Lady at the right-hand side, there's an inconsequential old lady. Now, I know her name is Judy. I know that the photo on the left is when she was at university. Indeed, she went into the Fisher, for those that went to university, said the Fisher quadrangle, to get her marks for psychology year one. She went to the pass marks. Her name wasn't there. Her husband proudly pointed out that he was on there, so he'd got a pass. So Judy went home that night and thought she'd failed. And the next day she came back to university and she was told that she'd actually got a high distinction. So her husband never lived that down. But she was brilliant, humble, brilliant. And she got first class honours all the way through. In the middle, she just spent time in Cairo on a tip, helping orphans. So she had a heart for those in need. And not only that, but she actually practically did it. She also spent 10 years visiting prisoners. She was part of a Christian mission group that actually believed in redemption and would go and visit personally prisoners. And there she is celebrating New Year's Eve towards the end of her life. Now, that's Judy, and in those last days on the right-hand side, those that cared for her knew those stories. They spoke about them. They upheld them. They gave dignity to it. And their family. They cared for us. We were part of it. And that work that we do, that's me, but at the moment, across all the various facilities you have, there are other families, and they're feeling the same things. And we have the privilege to hold them, to care for them. And we can't lose that, in the reform, or in the graphs, or the statistics, or the compliance. You can't lose that, because it's wondrous, and it's powerful, and it's life-changing. And that is why people want to come and work in this sector. That's why my two girls are working as care workers, because they can see the impact and the power we have. We need to talk about that. We need to celebrate that, and we need to lift that up. Because if we do, I think that this sector is going to be one that others look at and say, how are they getting so many people? Isn't it incredible the work they do? We've been through the challenges of funding that wasn't there. There is a hope that more funding will be there. It'll enable us to do the care and the things we do. So I've experienced it, but I've also seen it. Elliot and Val, 71 years married. That photo was taken after 5 months of separation in a pandemic. They both have dementia, living in separate places as they were at this time. But the families and the carers were desperate to get them back together. And they thought they might not recognise each other. They might not actually remember or see or connect in a way, who are they? But as you can see, they did. And that powerful connection, that relationship, that ability to love, to remember, that is something that we should be proud of. To recognise that, to support that, to encourage that, to hold that. And I think that what we haven't done enough as a sector is to do that, is to promote and celebrate the work we do. It is life-changing, it is nation-changing. And why am I optimistic? Well, I think with some of those reforms and funding and the intent and the leadership and the capacity that I see building across this sector, I see a very different future. Yes, there'll be challenges. Yes, it's hard, and every day has got its own. But I think the next generation is going to be very different. And I encourage you to play that role. Thank you very much.